and this and
Oh,
this is her first, these are her first holidays alone. So I
oh,
wanted to be with her for the holidays.
nice.
But yeah, I'm a New Yorker at heart. I'm sure where I used to be thinking maybe I'm gonna, maybe I'll move down here. I need New York.
I have many dear friends that decided to move to North Carolina when they get older.
Maybe if I had, a partner, a husband, or,
The community.
it would be a community. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But, just like just one friend is, as much as I love her, I wish I could take her back with me to New York, because there's
Okay.
just not enough here. It's way.
Well, if you tell me which city and where she is precisely, I can hook you up with this. Again, I have many dear friends in North Carolina. Many.
Well, I'll probably go back home after the new year. I think I'll go back home. But I'm in the I mean, it's a great area, except it's 20 minutes to get anywhere.
Oh, okay.
I'm by Wake Forest.
Wake Forest. I'm not too familiar with this, so I only know the big towns. You know how it goes.
It's near Raleigh.
Raleigh. Okay, Raleigh. Okay, yeah, got it. Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have again. I got many dear friends that decided to move there, and yeah, North Carolina, New Mexico, a lot of dear friends, a very close friend. Yeah.
Well, that, you know what, again, it's who you meet. We spent Thanksgiving with two friends of hers that I really love, and I'd love to see more of them. They're younger people, and I can speak to them more on a level that a lot of the older people here, they're very, very involved in the church.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit too much for me, because it's not so much on the spiritual as it is, in my opinion,
Yeah.
on the superstition or just what they've been told. And I don't resonate well with that. Yeah,
Mismatch frequency.
it doesn't match. And you know what? First of all, I feel like it makes me feel older. It really does. But that's because I went to a Christmas this will be my check-in. I went to a Christmas concert yesterday because she really wanted to go. I felt like I aged 20 years. It was like listening to music brought to you by Geritol. It was the highlight though was after we left the concert, she couldn't get into the car. Her key wasn't opening, and the only thing she could open was the trunk. And that prompted me to jump into the trunk and find the cables and get the seat to go down and climb through and save the day. And so I was young again. So that rejuvenated me. So good morning, everybody. Here I am.
A trip to remember.
It was, you know what? It was actually, and it's, so I'll just bring this out because I think it's an important point, because I remember other times in my life, and you probably all have similar experiences, what it's like when you're faced with like a challenge. And at first, it might scare. I mean, I wasn't scared. She was in a panic mode. Like, what are we going to do? It's nighttime and we're stuck in a parking lot and can't get in. But that moment when you're faced with like, this fear, whatever it is, and you overcome it, how good it feels after.
Yeah, I know. Many of those experience, life-threatening. Does hero come and save the day? And the
But
hero
when you're the hero, it's even better.
Hey, look, in the life-threatening situation, I'll pray for any hero, even the mosquitoes. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Save the day, life-threatening situation. Any heroes is do fine. But of course, if it's me, it'll be the best. But I will give up my hero status anytime so that I can get out of the life-threatening situation. Yeah.
Well, then maybe this pertains to women, because I'm specifically speaking, or children, or anybody that hasn't always felt empowered. There's
Oh, okay.
something very important about
that makes sense.
solving your own crisis.
Yeah. 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 It's more like in control, so that, I have control now, so I can do whatever needed to save the day, save the situation, and I'm the one. It's important. I know what you mean. I take it for granted because I grew up as the eldest in the family. And of course, the elders get the most attention, the elders get the most responsibility, the elders get to do all the chores, so the elders know the most. And of course, the elders, save the day most of the time. And I take it for granted because I remember vividly when I was 6 years old, I was explaining something I know that to my mom as a 6-year-old. So like my self-confidence is overflow. My self-confidence is, I take it for granted. I shouldn't have to do that. I mean, the point is that, yeah, I see what you're saying. The opposite, and my daughter, and my wife and my sisters are usually, I always give them opportunity to encourage them, to empower them, to give them the baton, to give them the opportunity to save the day, to become, they have choice. Yeah, it's important because once you have that, the acknowledgement that I am the one that can solve the problem is, it's a totally different atmosphere altogether. You're now equal instead of like one down, one up, like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think there's I think it's a crossover. I think it's both, because it's that initial fear. It's the knowing that you'll be guided. So it's not like you're the hero, but it's more like you can weather the storm. You'll, keep a cool head. The answer will come. And then when it's over, it's like I made it through the storm. So it's a progression. And it's you're not really doing it alone, but you're serving, or you're acting in a way that you can look back upon and feel like I survived.
Thank you. I mean, and even men have that kind of issue as well, right? So men also does that as well. I mean, I went through many experiences as well. So yes,
Eric?
go for it. You're muted.
Yeah. So following up on that, how do you teach children to be okay with the challenges they're going to face and teach them how to weather a storm? I mean, that's just where I'm thinking of, where do you take that? And what do you give children growing up to give them that feeling, yes, I can handle life? Because I know that my parents were very overprotected, and I had to learn a lot about life in college and after college. Just throwing it out as a question if anyone wants to talk about that.
Well, I think one of the things you give them is space. I know with my kids, I gave them a lot of space to not have the answer right away. I could say other things I did wrong, but they're all independent. Yeah, I think in general, we have to learn to stop swooping in all the time and fixing things and doing things. And people need a chance to try something, maybe fail, and wait until they ask for help.
Yeah, and see, in my case, failures happened in my adult years, and that was harder. If I had more leeway as a child to get out more, I would have learned more street smarts, I think.
Yeah, I guess the way that I deal with it was I got think of two ways. One is that I co-create stories with my children or the people I work with. So I co-created story with them so that they are co-creators. So they are the master of the situation. So for example, was reading a story, creating a story with my 3-year-old grandson. So I know he knows ABC and 1, 2, 3, right? So those are the things that they learn. So it's like, okay, long time ago, there was a mountain. The mountain number 1 is called A. Tell me what mountain number 2 is. You could say B, 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 like that kind of co-creating it. So they're equal instead of letting fear take over. So you know what you're doing, I don't know. No, you're equal. I'm co-creating story with you. So that's number 1. And number 2 is my dad. I really appreciate what he does, is that he will give me the newspaper of the day and point a news on the paper, read it and tell him what I think. So that's another thing that I go through. Like, okay, I get to speak my mind. I get to say what I want to say. So that encouraged me, sort of like, I call it sprouting, sort of like allowing me to grow my confidence so gently and carefully, and I'm being equal. So the problem, I would say the bad side of it is I don't have respect for authority. I have respect for their knowledge. I have respect for their, whatever, authority comes from the authority has a meaning, not just having power, but also have his authority in guitar playing, his authority in music creation. So it's a power, like he's so good in what he's doing, his knowledge, the practice, the experience. So I have respect for that, but I don't have the experience for the power version of the authority. Like, you must do this or you shall, you should be fired. I have no respect for that. It's like I'm big trouble a lot of times in that trouble. Doesn't mean that I put them down. It just means that I ignore that power, It didn't make sense. So it helps me in many ways, but also get myself into trouble as well. So that I know.
Yeah, thank you. Also thinking in terms of Barry's research to help kids get through the emotional barriers to learning. See, I also, like Sam, focused on schoolwork and it just excelled in that. And that's what I brought home to Mom. These are the tests I got hundreds on, and that's what I felt was going to giving me my reward. But I mean, what I'm noticing today, a lot of parents are unprepared for children. They still have issues from their childhood that never got worked out, and that could have a generational effect going forward. So, I mean, I'm just here to explore things that we could talk about anything. Thank you.
And left coaster.
So I came in late, I'm sorry. But what was the issue that required heroism in North Carolina? Or was it?
I accompanied my friend to a concert she wanted to go to, and I was saying how I really felt aged by it because it was just not for me. It was like music. I called it Muzak sponsored by Geritol. But when we got out, she was locked out of the car, but she was able to open. So I climbed into the trunk and I found the cables and I was able to push the seat down and climb through it. And the day was saved. So it was kind of fun. It was fun. And I was surprised how easy it was for me to like jump into the trunk and climb over the seats. That was it.
Had you not found that way into the car, was it like super cold? Was it super
Oh, she was
dangerous?
panicking. She was
Oh.
panicking without a doubt. I mean, yeah, she was really panicking. So I was managing that situation too.
Awesome.
Some people would label you as a leader with a cool mind, right? So
I've been told I have leadership qualities.
that's what it is. Trust me. In any situation, anybody can stand out and do what is needed to get done is a leader. I learned that when I was 13 years old.
So that's interesting that you bring up, because being that I'm the only woman on this call, I will say to you that what I learned about myself is there was a time where I knew that if I was in a group, I knew that we should do something as a group. And yet I listened to what the male person who had no authority over me said to do, and it didn't work. And it usually had to do with human dynamics. And I would, so I would say, let's go through the left and move in this direction. He would say, no, let's go this way. And I had a reason for wanting to do what I said to do. But I didn't bother fight, I figured, well, he must know better. So, that was years ago. Then I went through the stage where maybe somebody would say I was pushy, which is why I said I've been told I have leadership qualities, because somebody once spoke up and said, she's not pushy, she has leadership qualities. And I really embraced that.
Nice. It's complicated, like you say, it's human factor get involved, and how dare you, as a woman, how dare you stand out and do whatever you need to do and whatever. So that become complicated. So in my situation, I am the eldest in the family, so it's sort of like the brother usually want to be repelled because you don't know better than me or whatever. The reason that may be that create a fight situation, I say, okay, go ahead and do this, and then I'll just wait. Or I'll support you in whatever you want to do and see what happens. That would be the learning cycle need to go through with whoever that need to lead, they haven't feel the need unless you go along with that, because when you go, the best way I can explain is that the more you don't want them to do it, the more they want to do it. So especially with kids, so that don't do that. It's like, oh, because you told me that don't do that, I want to do it.
I feel like that almost, I'll let Eric speak, but
Well, your Stacy raises an interesting question, like, has our society embraced females in leadership positions? And just looking at, like, since the 1980s, what trajectory society has been on, like, where are our gaps now in anybody being, if you have the natural ability to be in a leadership position? It's just a question if you want to answer that or talk about it.
I was actually going to shift, which this kind of fits into. I want to talk sort of about force, because I feel that there needs to be brought into balance a difference between trying to push someone in direction. Like when Sam was talking about leadership, these were people that wanted to be led. They were asking. So there were two leaders, myself and this man. It's different when somebody is asking to be led as opposed to when somebody is trying to push someone in a direction. And for me, I think what our society is calling for is a little bit more of a balance between not forcing and calling people to move into their own sense of leadership. And it doesn't have to be so much for leading other people, but for meeting the call to what they're being led to. And it'll be at different degrees. Some people are more comfortable being told, this is what I want you to do. But I feel like it has to be more up to them which role they want to take. And they have to be willing to even take responsibility for that. Sometimes people, they don't want to lead because they don't want responsibility, and that's fine, but you still have to take responsibility for not being willing to take a leadership role. Whatever you do, you have to be responsible for.
So what you're saying, if I can phrase it differently, it would be a leader must also be a good follower as well before you can become a good leader. That was a conversation I have with my 12-year-old daughter when she was sitting in the back of the seat driving her to school. She was going to get in the campaign to become the, what do you call that, the leadership in the school, council member or something like that in the school. 12-year-old. And yeah, student body, right? Yeah, and I was saying something like, I said, Christina, do you know that a good leader is also I let her finish the sentence for me, and she within nanosecond, a good follower. A good leader also, she finished the sentence as a good follower. I said to her, wow, you got it. I said, well, think of the general. If you're not a good soldier, how could be a good general? Because you don't know how to follow people's instruction. If you don't know how to follow people's instruction, then how could you teach people how to follow your instruction? Think of it that way. So that's what the conversation was. So what you just point out was a good leader, not only a good leader, a true good leader must be also a good, true follower as well.
And I would add a good listener and observer, because I
Exactly.
think that a good leader brings out the best in others. And in order to bring out the best in others, you have to understand them.
Yep, exactly. So that's the topic of the Bohmian dialogue that we were talking about last weekend. It will become more important. How do you have an open conversation? How do you be a good listener, a passive listener as well? So those are a good practice. Unless you know how to have a great conversation, you can never be a good leader. Yes, Derek.
So I feel I'm more of an emergent leader. Like I'll start off as a follower, but then there will be situations where I step up and people people gravitate towards that, and they see that yeah, I can lead. Now I first realized that when someone told me at my first job that everybody was confused at this meeting, but what you said got everybody on board. That's what, 20 years ago or so. Now, what I am thinking about is leading the band, because I am a band leader and we're going to do some music for Hanukkah. Now, I'm really pretty loose. Like, I know that we don't have to sound perfect. I'll really just try to keep a tempo, and people are going to go off in their own directions. I'm not going to call them out and say, no, I'm not going to stop the band just because one person made a mistake. I mean, so I want people to grow from their mistakes and over time learn. And then, like, there was one guy, I gave him some time one-on-one to work on his playing, and it helped. So now what's challenging me now is when physical issues get in the way. Like I had a toothache for 2 days, and yesterday I spent navigating the dental system to figure out what's wrong with it. And yeah, so I had pain, and the pain, it just knocks you for a loop. Like I had to just lay in bed for a while until I got what I needed. And then now there's the future. Okay, what do I have to do? And then it gets me thinking, okay, I'm getting old. Yeah, right. Feeling old now. And is there a handbook for how to navigate getting old? Is anyone writing that? Yeah. But so, but I'm able to adapt. Like I could play the piano keyboard for this upcoming Hanukkah gig instead of clarinet, which would be bad for the oral. I may have oral surgery on Friday, so we'll see. But it's about playing things by ear too, adapting with the times and the situations. And yeah, the thing is, I can't really get a sense of how cohesive the groups are. I know that people like me in leadership roles, but unless I really ask for feedback, it's hard for me to ask for feedback. And yeah, I guess I still have old attitudes of perfection instilled in me by my school years, which I know logically, but there's the emotional internalization of that'll keep me from seeking help in a lot of places. But I'm learning over time. And, glad to be here today. This is like just to take a step back for me and not run around, just to be myself, be with you guys and gals. Okay, thanks.
Ari, you want to jump in while there's a space?
Yeah, sure. If I if I had been there in North Carolina observing the scenario, the first thing that would have come to my mind is that, at least for older vintage cars, there's a separate key for the trunk and the ignition. And the ignition key opens the driver's door and the passenger door, but not the trunk. And the trunk key opens the trunk. So the first thing I would ask is, are there two keys? And
She
if
had
so,
no other key.
the second thing I would think of, if determining there's only one key and it has to operate everything, all the locks, is the modern keys, where there's only one key, can be put in either way, and they go in both ways. A lot of keys that can only go in right side up, but there are a lot of car keys can go in either way. So the next thing I try is turn the key 180 degrees and try it again. Third thing I would say is, there are two front doors with locks, the driver's side and the passenger side. Try opening the passenger side door. If none of those work, and those are easy to check out, if none of those work, then go into the trunk. But I wouldn't have gone through the trunk first, because I know that's a big deal. I would do all the easy, obvious things first. But notice, for me to do some thinking, some diagnostic reasoning, and some possibilities, I need two things. I need the generic faculty of model-based reasoning, and I need the applicable model for the case at hand. And to get back to what I think it was Eric was saying, what do children need to be taught? Number one, the faculty of model-based reasoning in general, and then the applicable model for the case at hand. Now, a lot of people, well, historically, when species lived in the wild, you had a model of nature, because you're in nature's world, and all the mental models is, how do things work in nature? But the faculty of model-based reasoning, as applied to models of nature, can also be applied to models of technology. Now, that's where there's a huge divide in our population. There are people like the two Sams and me and Eric who will study technology and acquire models, mental models or technical models of technology systems. And we can use the faculty of model-based reasoning with respect to applicable technology models like keys and locks, for example. Yesterday, I did a house call on Fix-It. There was a lady who came into the Fix-It shop, and she had an iron that needed to be fixed, but she also said, I have an item that needs to be repaired, but it's too big to bring in. They had acquired an old classical pinball machine, good standard size pinball machine that they had acquired from a friend, and they were trying to get it to work, and it was in a stuck mode where it kept bing, 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 and wouldn't run. And she says, I can't bring it. I said, I'll do a house call for you. So I went to their house, and she was there with her husband, and he knew how to take the glass off the top to get to the top side. And we could see that two little buttons that the ball runs over were stuck. They were stuck down. And so we looked at them and we said, okay, I can see that they're stuck, and I can see why they're stuck. And so we addressed the issue of getting any foreign matter out of the way that was keeping these buttons stuck down. And then the next question is, you haven't used this machine in ages. Are the metal moving parts getting stiction and friction and need to be lubricated? And do they need to be worn in and used so that they loosen up? So we fixed it. But I had to use a modest amount of model-based reasoning where the model was technology, switches and relays and buttons and electronics, where the husband and the wife didn't have mental models of technology. He was in the finance business, and I don't remember what she was in. But when people bring tech items of household appliances into the Fix-It shop, the most common complaint that they write down is, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. No symptoms written down. No report of anything that they tried that didn't work. Just, it doesn't work. And right away, that tells me they don't have a clue as to how it works or how to do any even simple diagnostic reasoning, like, does keys go in both ways? Are there separate keys for? So I keep coming back to the same challenge. We're in the 21st century. We live not out in nature, in the woods and in the forest and in the mountains. We live surrounded by high technology. And we have the faculty of model-based reasoning historically from living in the wild, but we don't have the actual models of all this technology. So for example, I noticed that after Stacy stops talking and somebody else starts talking, that the first few words of the second person are coming echoed back from Stacy's computer. And I see that Stacy's not in her normal place. It looks like she's on an older computer, and she's probably on a computer that's slow to switch from speaker mode to audio to microphone mode to speaker mode. And if that had been a serious issue, I would have said, Stacy, do you have any headphones? Because I know that if Stacy put on headphones, it would solve that problem. The other way to solve it, which is to adjust, the echo switching, the automatic switching, would have taken a lot longer and probably wouldn't have worked, especially if Stacy's on her old machine.
I could lower my speakers.
That's the other thing you could do, is you could turn your speaker volume down. But and the evidence that I had is I turned on the live chat, the speech to text, and I could see that when somebody spoke after Stacy, the echo was also in the speech to text, and it was coming from Stacy. So I had the evidence to confirm the theory. Now, it turns out that for the most of my career, I had no idea how rare that faculty is. Model-based reasoning with an applicable model. I used to love to listen on public radio to Car Talk with Click and Clack, the Tappet brothers. And people would call in with car problem, and they would describe the problem in some erratic way of describing it. And then Tom and Ray would immediately go into model-based reasoning with the correct model of how automobile technology works. And they would begin to suggest reasons for the symptoms that the caller had described. And they would discuss, using the model, which failed mode would generate the observed symptom. And I love that show, not just because it was entertaining, but because they, week after week, demonstrated the power of model-based reasoning with correct models, reliable models. And I lament, time and again, I lament that our general population, the general public here in the 21st century, are not learning the joys of model-based reasoning together with relevant models for routine technology items. My next door neighbor, Mary Lou, she's a widow, and she has the Verizon Wi-Fi in her condo, and her Verizon Wi-Fi has one unit in the den. That's the one unit. It's a Wi-Fi base station, and it's as far away from her bedroom as you could possibly get in the layout of her condo. And she says, when I take my laptop into the bedroom, I lose the Wi-Fi. I said, well, yeah, because your Wi-Fi base station is maximally distant from it. And I said, there's several solutions. And I discussed, without going in details, the solutions that I could provide her for free. But instead, her son, her adult son, bought off of Amazon a device called Eero, E-E-R-O. And it is a Wi-Fi extender that uses a brand new technology called a mesh network. So new that even though I knew of it, I didn't know the details of how it worked. But here's what she said. She says, now I have a signal in my bedroom and everywhere else in the house. She says, but when I walk back into the original room, I lose the signal. I lose the internet, she says. I said, well, that's interesting because you still have the Wi-Fi in that room, but that Wi-Fi is no longer talking to the internet. And I said, when your son installed it, did he make sure that the new system was compatible with the old system. She says, oh, it's easy. She says, this is a piece of cake. Everybody says this. You just plug it in and it works. I said, it's not working in your house. Turned out, when her son set it up, he gave the new stations, the new base stations, the same SSID name as the original one. So when she walks around with her iPhone, as soon as she walks into that room, it switches to the other base station. But the other base station, which is on the same name, isn't routing. Why? Because the Eero says, I'm the new router. You old guy, you go and get retired. So the old device still has a base station, but it doesn't route anymore. And I said, the instruction says, don't use the same SSID or you're going to get into trouble. It says right there. She says, well, he read the instructions. I said, he found the one incompatible mode they told you to worry about. Then I said, there's two solutions. One is put the Eero in bridge mode and let the original guy be the router, or turn off the Wi-Fi or change the base station name. Turned out the only way to do it was to change the name of the SSID of the old device. And it took me like an hour to figure out which solution would work. In the meantime, she's in an absolute panic. She's screaming and yelling and running around the house and kvetching and complaining. And I'm trying to think about which solution to use model-based reasoning. And she's interfering with my ability to focus. She hasn't a clue how to reason, and neither did her son, who's not a technician. And the one guy who's trying to do model-based reasoning and acquire the model of how these new systems work and how to make them work compatibly with the old system, I'm sitting here listening to her be in a state of panic. Well, they eventually got it fixed, but it took longer than it should have. And then she gave me a package of frozen chili to take home for my reward. Which was very nice because I love chili and I don't make chili at home. But the bottom line is model-based reasoning is undertaught in general, and knowing where to find the correct models to reason with is limited to a tiny, tiny fraction of our technical population who charge an enormous amount of money for that little bit of knowledge to fix things that are broken.
Sam?
So I have a question about that. In school, there was an extracurricular activity that was encouraged by teachers and others for many students. I never enjoyed it. It was called debate club. So you're supposed to pick a topic, take one side of it, the other team would take another side of it, you would debate, and then possibly switch. So my question is, does debate club help or hurt acquisition of model-based reasoning?
It destroys it. It doesn't just hurt it, it destroys it.
See, I see a lot of people involved in debate who don't really care so much about mutual understanding. They care about winning.
Yeah.
So the question is, why is debating viewed as an important skill for schools to teach? And does that go back to our history, the debates for the Constitution or things like that? And are we stuck in a model? I'm sorry, Stacy, you have a hand up. I didn't see it.
Stuck in a dysfunctional system.
Well, I just want to address what you just said, Eric, real quickly in one sentence, and then I want to go to my original. I think the intention for debate was a good one. I think the intention is to get people to look at different sides of a situation from different points of view. So I do think, it has a good intention. Okay, let me push that away. I want to go back to the model-based reasoning thing that Barry brought up. I mean, I agree. I didn't understand how rare the ability was to use model-based reasoning because I didn't even know what it was. That being said, I know that I am very skilled at using model-based reasoning. And I think that there probably are a lot of people in marginalized communities, and that could be children as well. So whether they be children or women or just people of less power that are not recognized as having an ability to be skilled at model-based reasoning, that are never given an opportunity to understand what the model is. So speaking for myself, there have been times where I have asked a specific question because I'm already putting together the model in my head. And the person I'm asking, who is already assuming they must know why I'm asking, is giving me their opinion on something when I'm just asking for a piece of information so that I could put it into a particular model that I'm building. So it's almost like there's no recognition. Like and I do see it as a power thing. In organizations, for example, and this might sound more familiar, because you want to remain valuable, lots of people want to keep what they do secret, because then they're more valuable. If nobody else can do what they're able to do, they become more valuable. So they don't share the information as to what's actually going on. And I think that happens in life. People don't necessarily want to expose what they know. They would rather just tell you. And maybe it's not always with, a bad intention. Maybe they think they're being helpful. They're just going to help you and give you the answer to what you're looking for. But it's kind of unfair because there are a lot of people, and I'm going to speak mostly about children, that deserve an opportunity to learn for themselves. I mean, I observe conversations even on Facebook that talk about teaching things privately or secretively because they're trying to control the information as opposed to openly showing and explaining why it doesn't fit or why it's not valid. So the point of what I'm trying to say is this. There needs to be this beginner baseline where people that do have an ability to use model-based reasoning can understand how the model works in the first place before all the complexity is thrown into the mix. With that, I'm complete. Did my echo stop now that I lowered my speakers?
Yep, looks like it. I take it back.
See, model-based reasoning.
Just something else, Stacy.
Testing 1, 2.
Testing 1, 2. Good, I didn't get an echo on that one.
So I'm wondering now, is the way we raise children, it definitely varies by culture, but are our problems due to US culture? Or are there other, there are other examples. There's a lot of negative examples around the world, but if you want to go in this direction, like, do you want to think around the world in different ways? I was also thinking in terms of Barry's model of you learn something simple, but then you have to unlearn it in order to enhance your knowledge with new information.
You have to keep refining the model. Like the model of the key in the lock. I mean, originally there was 2 keys, then there's 1 key and it turns either way. And then you have to realize that the model is evolving with the technology because the technology is evolving. It wasn't true with nature. Nature evolved so slowly that once you had a reliable model of nature, nature was going to be the same for the rest of your life. It ain't true with technology.
Sam?
I'm gonna have to recover the thought that I had, which was trying to respond to Eric. Eric, could you ask your question one more time, please?
I was thinking about culture around the world,
Got it.
education. Yeah.
Got it. So the response I had reflects back to my question about debate club. There are multiple different systems of justice around the world, but the one that I believe is in the US is characterized, at least from my lay person's understanding, as an adversarial system. Plaintiff, defendant, they essentially are presented and pitted against each other as adversaries. Whereas other systems of truth are not adversarial. They're actually of justice are not adversarial. They're actually trying to get at the truth. There's a very, very strong difference. So for example, if one party in an adversarial system wins, that's considered just. So if one party has lots of money and lots of lawyers and the other party doesn't, and this party wins, that's considered justice here in the US. That wouldn't be considered justice or even truthful in many other places. So you can see these subtle ways in which this debate-oriented culture, instead of a truth-oriented culture, pervades a lot of our practices, especially the law. Over.
It's a classical lamentable dysfunction of US political theory. It's dysfunctional, and if you have a good model, you can realize that's dysfunctional, why it's dysfunctional, and how to fix it. And our culture is too stupid to do that. Go ahead, Sam.
This is a very complex subject here, my friend. I deal with it every day and since the day I was born, I guess. So I'm not sure how to begin. So talk about the debate team, the debate. It's about training you to get the point across. I remember my first debate was I prepared all the facts, all the model-based reasoning. I got all my facts. I had 20 pages worth of facts to debate. I lost the debate because I got too many facts. The people listening to it get confused with it. So I learned to okay, only focus on one or two things. That's it, so that they can understand and they can get my point across, and I'll get a check plus on that. And I learned that on my second or third debate that so I can get, I won't be winning, but at least I'm getting closer. So that was I learned from it. It's like, it's nothing to do with your facts and model-based reasoning when you come to human factor. It's about convincing the others so they understand, they get the point and all that stuff. So that's one subject. Model-based training, model-based reasoning is only good when you can only focus on one subject at a time. I was clapping and laughing when Barry was talking about the lady was making all the what I call interference or sabotaging, and he still said, like, I'm not going to let you get to me and all that stuff. It is so hard because most people cannot handle it, and there's like, okay, when you quiet down, I'll come back, or something along that line. So again, it's you need to have this is what I call energy. It's like you need to have enough energy bandwidth to deal with whatever that's coming at you that's trying to knock you off your base or something along that line. So that's, as a leadership, you have to have enough energy. You need to have tolerance. You have to compassion. She's panic. You're understanding all kinds of interference that we get every day. And you need to be able to handle that, weather the storm or whatever you want to call that, right? So that's another factor. Another factor is about, I'm sure you know about this, and we talk about this many times here, is that we are not logical. We always make the illogical decision because that's how a human being is. So you got to allow the illogical decision be made, even though you're doing the right thing and people don't understand you and they make the illogical decision. We have many scientific studies that prove that it's the case, and I'm 100% convinced that even if myself, I keep telling my employee, I don't trust myself. I need the data to show that. So I trust the data. So it's like I need to remind that I could making a wrong decision because I have illogical mind like everybody else does. Unless I can acknowledge that, I cannot be a good leader. So My focus on leadership is about the result. It's the result, what we want or we agree on before we start this project. And sometimes asking for feedback is the most difficult thing part for leader to do. But unless you ask for feedback and be able to say, give it to me. Don't try to please me because I'm a leader so that I can get a raise next time. But give it to me as so that the next time we can get this thing done in a much more efficient, peaceful, harmonious way. And it's complicated. So I'm grateful we talk about that, but we need to focus on one little thing at a time. It's like cognitive, the way the brain works. I think I talked about the video about the everything we see is depend on our biological body, our processors, biological processor. It's all kinds of errors, all kinds of mistakes, all kinds of dissolution. Welcome to the human world. I'm complete.
So if I could just jump in there, because I'm always looking towards the future. And since you're talking about leadership, and this to me connects to where Eric brought up how he feels that he's often an emergent leader. I really believe that who's around, I mean, I don't believe in one leader. I actually always believe in a leadership team, because there are different times where a different leader within that team emerges. And I think that's important. And when you're talking about the interference, it is very difficult for a leader to focus on whatever they're doing and deal with that interference. And that can cause very, very serious problems. So to have whoever's around you to have those people be able to field those things, so that whoever is leading at the moment, or the lead person for that particular task, can do what they are best at. That's important. That's a key point. So again, I look at it in terms of a leadership team where they pick up the slack for each other, where they know, and those are who they look to for feedback, because they know who has what qualities, where each excels, and they complement each other. And I think that's something that's important moving into this new future that we envision. Because again, going back to the sense of community, when Eric asks about kids, I think community is vital, because it's not just now that parents are dealing with their untreated wounds from childhood. It's been throughout history. And that's why we're all so messed up. But it's going to take a community, and there might be some families, because they have family and their kids do fine. But if we really care about the whole of society, there needs to be a place for anybody in need at any time. So the system has to change. I'm complete.
I'm going to address two issues here. One issue is about interference. The only one I know that how to stop the interference from bombarding me as I'm trying to execute my whatever need to be executed is that I need to have trust. They have to have trust in me. If they have trust in me, then there won't be any interference. So to me, that's the most effective way of doing it. So at the same time, you build your team member, your community to have trust in you. I can do this, so you trust me, so you don't have to interfere me. But if you don't trust me, I'm trying to kick you out of it, then I need to interfere with you. So I don't think you can do it, or something like that. That's one subject. The second one subject is talk about the kids today. You know why I don't interfere with the way that my kids in raising their kids? Because the way that they're doing, the parents are doing it, is the way that they allow them to survive. So they're doing their best to adapt and adjust and compete and deal with the challenges they have. So, and my grandchildren will pick up from the father and mother and see how they survive, and then they learn from it. So this is how it works. It's sort of like a wave after a wave after a wave. So that's why I will make some small adjustment or allow them to understand some new concept that's not in the same way that they were brought up. But I don't want to, like, if the kids grow up with me, if my grandson grow up with me, will will be ill-equipped to deal with the society because they are not following what their parents are going through right now. So again, I can go more into that, but essentially is that I believe in mirror neurons. I believe in whatever they're doing the best right now. My son and my daughter-in-law is doing the best. They're doing they can, and the grandchildren is following whatever they can. So it's like following them instead of going through my version of the way I was raised. So that's simple as that. Thank you. I'm complete.
You're muted. You're
Yes.
muted, Sam.
So if I may, I want to respond first to something Eric said about music. One of the really enjoyable things I find about music, and strangely and sadly, that musicians understand more so probably than a lot of other constituents in society, except for perhaps sports teams, is that in music, each person has an opportunity to play their part, to be the leader, to lead that particular passage, or to support in a very interesting way someone else's work, or to really extend a pause so certain emphasis is given to a certain piece of music. There's just a number of ways that music teaches that, and it's natural. It's really appreciated when done well in music. So that's what I think would accentuate Eric's point about there's leadership and then there's leaders. And I think you also mentioned that, Stacy. There's a difference in saying, oh, that person is a leader and labeling that person versus this person is doing an act of leading. It may be fleeting. It may be, multiple years. There's different phenomena being described. One's just a label. The other is actually recognizing what someone is actually trying to do in a context. And your point also, Stacy, about healing from past trauma. You guys probably know I was sitting in 6D on Alaska 2059 on October 22nd. That person, many days later, was found to have self-medicated using mushrooms because you know why? Because if pilots ever give a small, no matter how minuscule inkling that they're mentally unstable or going through a period or, missing a friend who just died or, having trouble at home, they're immediately grounded. Their income depends on them presenting this perfect mental state. And this guy was suffering for 6 years and he couldn't go to any professional and seek help. So what did he do? He yanked the fuel levers in the cockpit. Okay, I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm just trying, this is the system he was working in. And that was the consequence that system led him to. And if it weren't for, the alert to pilots in the cockpit, you wouldn't be listening to this particular piece of commentary. The last thing I'll say is something that Sam just said, which is I grew up, and probably Sam or maybe some of you might have, but not many people in this country have grown up in a multi-generational household. So I grew up in a household where, okay, so here's another phenomenon. My dad was one of 11 kids. So he was the second oldest male of 11 kids, but the oldest surviving. So I was the oldest son of the oldest son. And then most of the other of his siblings were younger. And of course, there was my grandparents. And we all lived in one place. It was my grandfather's hospital. And the hospital was the first 2 floors, and the family home was the 3rd floor. So I grew up with uncles, aunts, cousins. There was never a lack of somebody to interact with and learn from and go out into the town with, so what Sam was saying about learning from parents is necessary if we have these atomic families, okay, so kids learn from parents, but the grandparents don't typically live in the same household in this US. Whereas in the household that I grew up in, there were 3 generations. I was trying to recreate that here. When my parents, were looking to retire, I invited my parents to come live with me. My dad actually did that, for a few months until he decided it was too cold and, other reasons. But I at least tried to create that here. So it's not necessary to say, oh, parents only live with their kids and the kids only learn from one generation. It is possible to learn from multiple generations, and many cultures do this. I believe there are cultures in Africa that do this. There's Eastern cultures that do this. Probably in the Middle East, there were, villages that had that as well. So anyway, I'm thinking that, the US has a kind of this pioneering culture. And one of the things that used to be considered pioneering was this idea that, oh, I grew up, I'm going to go live my life. I'm going to go out into the Wild West. I'm going to conquer the frontiers. And that grew to, I think, this atomic family notion, whereas people didn't stay in one neighborhood and, grew up in a multi-generational household. Anyway, so those are different aspects I just wanted to point out in response to the last 3 speakers, Eric, Stacy, and Sam. Over.
Thanks, Sam. Of course, I grew up in a multi-generation environment as well, which is the best, right? All I'm saying is that, don't interfere with when the parents are teaching the kids. That's my point, is because for them, that's the most important part. And then learning from grandparents and learning from uncles and all that are less important as learning what, and especially in America, everybody is so productive. So the parents are and the grandchildren are live far apart, and my focus was like, okay, if you allow the kids to learn from their parents, they're going to do just fine. Because I think of it like passing the baton. The first runner and the last don't pass. The first runner don't try to pass the baton to the third runner or something along that line. So as long as they go in sequence, we're doing fine. But if you can hold 3 batons in your hand, go for it. I'm complete.
And just as a small follow-up to that previous point, starting probably about 30 or 35 years ago, this family started having family reunions every 4 years. So, whether it's California or Atlanta or Texas or Monterey or Hawaii or Taiwan, every 4 years we got together. And so because of COVID, actually, we actually had to cancel one of those. But what we replaced it with was a Zoom meeting every Saturday at 5 p.m., actually 4 p.m., because it's actually 8 a.m. Taiwan time. So rather than every 4 years, right now we have a 3-generational Zoom session every Saturday. So that's what we've replaced it with. And we'll still have those in-person reunions. But this is another way to keep the multi-generational stories going. It's funny on one hand, but it's also very it's a cultural thing where stories get passed on from generation to generation. And I thought it was kind of cool to share that, because it's something that when I talk to my friends and other friends about, there doesn't seem to be a similar multi-generational interaction that's really focused on and persistent. Over.
Chinese, we have a saying that when you have an old elderly person in your family, it's a gym. And from my perspective, is that if you allow the young children to interact with the older one, especially a very old one, to me, that's priceless, because you get to see how to take care of people, take care of the wise one, and see how when they get, so when they are 3-year-old, they know how the old person look like and all that stuff, instead of only interact with all the young people. So for me, that's an experience that's priceless. Interaction in terms of gentleness and anyway, all kinds of dynamic that it's very different from we interact with the older person than the parents only. So that's really priceless to me. I even have my kids fly back all the way to Malaysia to spend time with my family and my mom and and all the uncles and all that stuff. So make sure they have that experience. So to me, experience with different people, different ages, different generation is totally priceless. I couldn't stress it enough. I'm complete.
you know,
Joshua,
Yep, I'm here.
there's no doubt that there's an advantage to having an extended multi-generational family. The challenge is that we live, at least in America, with millions and millions of people that don't have that. And what are we going to do about that? Because that affects all of us. And you know, that's what's most upsetting to me.
And I think the school system fills in that role that they weren't expected to, but I think that's what people are expecting. The schools will take care of the kids, how they grow up.
And maybe that's part of what needs to be addressed, because I think that there's a group of people that think that the schools should, and another group of people that think that the schools shouldn't. And how do you design a system when you're not agreed on what its purpose should serve?
Yeah, I believe there should be school choice, different types of schooling, not restricted by laws or states, but yeah, if parents had the opportunity to evaluate and choose different educational systems, not necessarily being forced into one or the other.
You know, I was sort of having this discussion with my friend yesterday a little bit. I mean, right now it seems that religious organizations are the ones that really pick up the slack and act like a community. If I had my choice, it would be a more integrated community effort. You know, it's not so much that I want it to be more secular as I want it to be more integrated.
Now, I'm reading a book now by Cory Doctorow called The Lost Cause, and he's setting this story in the future in Burbank, California, and the kids of that community, they're doing all kinds of multiple projects, and they're letting immigrants in, and they're working together. But it's set in the context of climate change, where there have been disasters, and these kids have been sent around the world to help out people relocate from climate disasters. So he's painting a picture of a possible future, but then he's also showing the other side that's holding on to the old stuff that doesn't work. So I'm just throwing that out there as a thought.
That's interesting.
experiment.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you really have to have some structure, people to work in that, to make these communities, but not everyone's gonna want it. And maybe some states, see, the states are really experimental laboratories. So yeah, maybe whoever wants it, go to California. Whoever doesn't, go to Texas. I don't know.
Or to be able to have different degrees of participation.
There was a book called It Takes a Village to Raise a Kids. I wonder how many of your kids that grew up with your neighbors' kids and play with them and grew up together. And how many neighbors do you know in your neighborhood in America? To me, that's pretty sad. The way we grew up was, you know, you can run all over the neighborhood and not worry about this. Right here is so protective. It's so have so many I say phobia around strangers and all that stuff. Like I don't want to even go there.
It was different when I grew up in the 70s, and it was probably better for my brother's generation, born in the 60s. So, I mean, we lived in Brooklyn, and various on row houses with, there's like a community driveway, so you know your neighbors, and yeah, and then kids are playing all over the place. So something's been lost from that. I don't know if, yeah, maybe some communities still, but yeah, neighborhoods change over time. And now, yeah, there's economic issues. It did exist at one point, and it probably still does in certain places. But I noticed that there was like a heavy religious emphasis that, oh, these are the Italians, these are the Jews, these are whatever. Yeah.
I've had the experience of both. So when I was a kid, in the summers, we went to the bungalow colonies upstate, and that's how we spend our summers. And my grandparents were right next door, so I got that multi-generational experience because for 3 months, I basically lived with them. But I also lived in a community with the same families that came every year. So I had 50 or 60 families that were like family, even though we weren't related. When I would go home, it was different. But at that time in the 70s, we were still playing in the streets, riding our bicycles. So we still knew our neighbors. And even if we weren't like super, super close having dinner every day, we were still in and out of each other's houses to use the bathroom, or we still knew each other. If something went on, our parents would find out about it. By the time I was raising my children, though, well, I have older children. So the time I was raising my older children, in the beginning, there was still a little bit of playing out. And we had a pool in a backyard, and I always invited my neighbors over. So we still had, our block was functioning. 10 years later, by the time I had my youngest child, everything was different. Everything was computerized. Everybody played games by the computers. But the other thing was the religious part, because now people played sports teams through their religious organizations. We're Jewish. We were not part of that group. We had a different group, but the base wasn't within our neighborhood. So we had to get in the car and drive. We went to different schools. It was a very different situation. And now, 20 years later, it's probably even worse. You know, when I drive by, I don't see any kids playing on the street at all. So I find that really sad, because my happiest days were at the bungalow colonies, where I had all the families that I knew forever. And even my personality was different then than it was when I got to my regular home. I was much quieter, and I was shy, and in the bungalow colony, I was totally different.
More
What?
gregarious.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, more like I am now.
I wonder if Sam and Eric got the word that I spoke.
What were you saying?
More?
Gregarious, yes.
Okay. Because it was echoing back off of Stacy's side, so it was garbage.
Yeah, because you both were talking to each other alternately, so the computer couldn't catch up.
Yeah.
For the record, I didn't get it.
Yeah, Stacy's computer wasn't switching to the mic off mode fast enough, so her mic was still on.
And as we get older, our brains won't switch as fast to other modes. What this brought up in my mind is research I've been doing on the shtetl culture through music, because there's music that was found recently in Russia that now people are starting to perform it. And it brings back memories of a time before the Russian Revolution and all the craziness of the 20th century, when the communities were very close-knit, and they didn't have the technology that we have today, but they made do with their lives. They were all working trades and interdependent on each other. I think that interdependence is a key to communities and making it work. And maybe in the future, there will be requirements for people to be more independent, depending on environmental issues. We'll see. But people will learn one way or another. But for now, the politics of the world is leading to war all over, it seems. And until we could get beyond that, when do we get together and talk? Yeah. I don't want to depress anybody, but yeah, we have to keep our minds positive. Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I love to study anthropology. You know, going back 500 years ago, how was it life, and the one that we have today and the one we have 30 years ago, the one we have 60 years ago, it's all different, and we all did fine. So I'm not going to worry too much about the future, because history have proven that we're going to be adjusting. We'll be fine going forward.
Well, one thing again that I've been discussing a lot with my girlfriend, and I'll mention it again, that we are on two different political sides. So that's important to keep in mind, because it, it comes up a lot. But one thing that I've been talking to her about is that it seems that the one thing mankind doesn't seem to get right is, as individuals, there's a tendency by many to want to force others to believe the way they believe. And I understand it comes from a place of fear. And, there is truth in, safety in numbers and all of that. But that for me personally, I now find myself gravitating towards people who really value other people's autonomy and differences, because that value is correlated with other values that are important to me. And those are the people that I want to be working with. Those are the people that tend to appreciate me more, and I want to be appreciated. But in general, regardless of what somebody believes in, I appreciate the value they have in not wanting to push something on someone else. The desire for them to be really clear in themselves and in what they believe and be able to express it, but to not be so attached to somebody else buying into it. And I think that's really key, because we are individuals for a reason. Our fingerprints are different for a reason. And I believe there needs to be more of an appreciation for those subtle differences. Sam, you're muted though.
Subtle differences are rich. I'm hearing an echo.
Yep, it's coming back from Stacy again.
So I completely would agree with you on these nuances of thinking, nuances in perspective. Where I do disagree, and I hope this is not too pokey, is there's another end of the spectrum, which is a total disregard for truth. And on that one, I am very vehement that that should not be tolerated and needs to be minimized. Where I have a problem is people who do not understand truth and facts, and simple models still get a vote. So they still influence society, at least here in the US. And those perspectives, simple-mindedness or even total lack of regard for truth, has too much influence in the way society deals with assets, decisions, systems, governance, medicine, etc. So on that end of the spectrum, I respectfully disagree.
Yeah, so if I could just respond to that. I agree with what you just said. So for me, I know I can't change. Am I frozen? Can you hear me?
I can hear
Yeah,
you.
we can hear you. You're unfrozen now too.
Okay, good. I know I can't change the world. I can only change my reality. The people that you described, I won't even deal with them at all. So I have a litmus test. I feel like I'm freezing again. I don't know
You
if
are
you can hear.
frozen.
Your video is freezing, but your audio is fine.
You can still hear me? Okay, so I'll just still talk. So I have a litmus test. And if somebody, like, I don't care if somebody disagrees with me politically, if they're not able to acknowledge that Donald Trump has done wrong, and if they don't think he should be held accountable, then I can't even discuss anything else with them because I don't trust their judgment process. You know, and I explained that very clearly to her. So they're not even in that equation. I won't deal with them at all. I will look for the people in any group, even if I totally disagree with the politics of that group, I will look for the people that are most able to at least discuss things in a less biased way, or they have to at least agree on, 1 + 1 = 2. So that's how I handle that. I agree with you. If they can't even, yes, I agree with you on that. They're out of the equation. They don't even, but I don't look to destroy them or change them. I'm just building something new without them.
But my point was they still have influence in society. So I can ignore them personally, but they still affect society, and that's sad.
The effect
It
was-
is sad. However, like, so I was explaining to her about all the Republican, I said, she wanted to hear things from me. And I suggested to her that she listen to Republicans that have turned against him because they're at least coming from her perspective. And it would be more important for her to understand why they changed their mind, not why I think what I think. I guess what I'm saying is there needs to be like a third reality, a third place to go. And I think that would make some of them less powerful. I think some of the influence that those people have is because there's really not much choice.
Eric is.
So I'd like to question the impact of social media on the shaping of opinions, how much apart the changes in social media since like the 2010s going forward. I think we're seeing the effect of it now, a lot of polarization, but how did that polarization happen? And was big tech responsible deploying things that created filter bubbles and censorship or whatever? I think there is something that's different than previously because of technology. So just bringing that forward.
Before you go into the tech part, I just want to mention something about the human part, because I think that's really, really important. And I think part of the problem is that we've never learned to really discuss things in depth and really ask questions to clarify. I feel like we cast a net and we put everything in that net and we never unravel what's in it. And so, and then we just throw a label on it. And there's a lot mixed up in that label. And because we never became comfortable with having the conversation play out, we just ended the conversation and we got stuck with our assumptions. But the longer you talk to people, the more likely you will find that there are a lot of, with people that agree, talk long enough and you'll find all the differences where they don't agree. And conversely, but I'm more like at this point, I see a group of people that to me, they're like the warmongering people. But they're made up of, there's a lot of people in there that I would normally resonate with, but they're attracted to each other in a different, I can't even, you know what, it's so hard to find the words to articulate what I'm trying to say. I wish we looked at people as being more fractal. That's all I'm going to say.
About a week ago, I had a curious encounter with a stranger on somebody else's timeline. There was a chap who opened a topic that was of interest to me, and another person who was a stranger to me chimed in and took the contrary position to the one I took. And initially, I thought, okay, this is just a difference in perspective. But then after a while, it occurred to me, no, this guy's just trolling me. He's just being contrary for the thrill of perturbing me. But I didn't come to that conclusion until really towards the very end. So I took him seriously as simply having disorganized thoughts or ill-considered thoughts. So he would make an assertion that I knew to be nonsense or provocative or incorrect. And I adopted a response that's what Stacy might call the third way, the uncommon way. And it generally doesn't work, but basically it was all that was left here. So the guy would make an assertion, and it was provocative, annoying, even insulting. And I would say, is that your working hypothesis? If so, how did you falsify the null hypothesis? And the reason I put it that way is because he was claiming to be a scientific thinker and asserting that I wasn't one. In fact, when I employed the protocols of the scientific method with him by saying, well, that's your working hypothesis, how did you falsify the null hypothesis? It befuddled him. It confounded him. Because in fact, he couldn't employ the scientific method while I was employing it quite rigorously. And at the end, he basically asserted that I was a member of a cult, which I guess maybe rigorous scientists are a cult because we're a pretty small demographic. And then not only did he walk away, he blocked me, which kind of surprised me. But the downside of him blocking me is I could no longer capture the whole conversation because all of his responses suddenly vanished from my visibility. So I couldn't even show the conversation, for example, to Sam or to Eric and say, what do you think about this?
Well, they can find it for you.
Well, the problem is that the guy who had the thread, it was only visible to his friends. I was
none of us have
none
the
of
same
I
friend.
checked. None of you are the friends of this guy whose name is Hanson Dave. And you can check. Hanson Dave is a guy on Facebook who's got a modest number of friends. I happen to be one of them. This weird guy happened to be one of them. And I had one other third mutual friend. And she was the one who said, no, his comments are still there, but I couldn't see them. And none of you guys can see them unless you become a friend of the guy who opened the timeline. But it's interesting how about if you adopt a rigorous protocol of the scientific method. Somebody makes an assertion and you say, well, that's an interesting hypothesis, or that's a curious working hypothesis. How did you falsify the null hypothesis? It utterly discombobulates them if they're not actually scientific thinkers. Go ahead, Joshua.
I was just going to say, I haven't heard a conversation talk about how when the internet started, it was a lot of things were public, and then it became like a street fair where you think you're in the public square, but you're really on someone's porch. So you're in private, but you're in public, but you're in private. So I think that's the miscommunication, is once you start not knowing where you are on the internet, you think you're in a public room with all your friends, but you're really on someone's chat thread that's private, that's their house. And that's what really confused the whole internet thing. If they had just kept it all public or said it's all private, it would have been clear to everybody. But they did these tricky things like, hey, little girl, want some candy? Come on in. Okay, now you're in my house. Now the rules don't apply in public. So it's a really dangerous place is what I'm trying to say. I've been fighting the whole I've been saying this from the rafters at meetings, at state places, at public announcements, at colleges. You are in public when you're on the internet. And nobody wanted to listen to me. Everyone, yeah, whatever. I don't even use it. I don't even use email. To, oh, I use email all the time, but I use a private one. Oh, wait, Earthlink's not private? Wait, I pay for that. I thought it was private. And then Gmail and Hotmail, and before you know it, they slowly infiltrated. Same thing on the timeline on Facebook. It was your own private timeline, and then ads started popping up. Wait, I thought that was my timeline. I thought I owned the timeline. That was the big innovation. So I'm saying you can call it a tech trick, a magic trick, a takeover of people's activities, but it's getting to the point where I got to start saying it like, sorry, I'm ranting right now, but I'm really passionate about the fact that people don't know where they are when they're on the internet. And it's really important because at this point, I'm hearing, like, I just heard Elon Musk say, oh, actually, data is worth more than gold in some ways because of this. And when he says data, he's talking about the activity of you, me, Sam, Eric, Barry, like all of us, Stacy, they're using us as the product, and no one's okay, that's fine, we're the product. Like, no, there's rights, we have laws, like we should stand up for ourselves. Anyway, with that, I'm complete. I'm just saying it's been a long, slow creep and a long, slow little turn the heat just a little bit, and now we're about to boil. We're all frogs about to boil, and there's nothing we can do. We're all in the pot together. And with that, I'm complete.
I'm going to go back to what Stacey said and what Barry was talking about, using scientific method to prove something. So I wonder, or just something come to pop up in my mind, wonder, like, if we say that Trump is so bad, then if someone else got elected after him, he would have reversed everything that Trump did. So the question is, how many things that Trump did that got reversed because he was so bad? That would be a scientific thing to. I mean, again, I wonder if someone done that research or something. I have no idea. So I'm just questioning that. I'm complete.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing, because this is what I told my friend. It's not about Trump. My issue is not about Trump. My issue is with the notion that so many people could follow one person, and no matter what that one person does, they will find a way to make exceptions for it. But if somebody else did it, they'd have a problem with it. So I don't have, my issue is not with him. My issue is with millions of people that have this defect where if one person does something, it's horrible, but if somebody else does it, there's nothing wrong with it at all. That's my concern. So my concern is really with the millions of voters as opposed to any one person. And I told her, I'm not afraid of any other Republican the way I'm afraid of this one particular person, because he does have what I would call a cult following. There's no other way. It's just too ingrained. And I don't give him all the credit for it. I don't think he created this on his own. I don't care who created it. That's just what it is right now. And there's no way you're going to convince those people otherwise. But there are a lot of other people that do know the difference, but they have no other place to channel their, like where do they go?
I want to double back. I want to double back to something that Joshua said. In 1996, when Bill Clinton was president, Congress passed a very short piece of legislation. It's 19 words, and it's known as Section 230 of the Communications Act. And Section 230 addressed an issue that in the nascent internet, remember in 1996, the internet had just begun to go public, that the NSF had let it go public and commercial. And so all of the commercial providers were very concerned about who's liable for a user on a public conversation system to say something libelous. And so Section 230 basically said, if you are operating a social network and you have a whole bunch of people on it, no matter what they say, the operator of the social network is not held liable unless they're also acting as a moderator. So if they do no moderation, if everything goes, they're cannot be held liable. But if they do any moderation at all, then they can be held liable for stuff that gets through that's scandalous or libelous or otherwise problematic. And what happened was there were two cases. One case was a company called Prodigy. And Prodigy did have moderators who were trying to keep it family safe. And stuff got through that the moderators let through, and somebody took umbrage and sued Prodigy and won. Prodigy went out of business. Another company called CompuServe said, it's the Wild West. We're not going to do any moderation. Anybody can say anything they want, and we're not going to moderate anything. And again, somebody sued CompuServe, and CompuServe got off scot-free because Section 230 said, we're not doing moderation, and the law says we're not liable. So Section 230 acted just the opposite of what was desired. They hadn't really thought it through. And by the way, Section 230 applies to the United States. But remember, in the early days, the internet was the United States. Really, nobody else had it yet. So the legal system of who's held responsible, the law turned it upside down. They didn't think it through. They didn't think through the consequences. And the people who wanted to be trolls and Truth Social, for example, they could put any nonsense up they wanted, scandalous or bogus or whatever, and you couldn't sue the operator of the site because of Section 230. And it turned the internet into a sewer, turned it into a sewer. And a lot of people basically said, I'm getting off the internet because it's a sewer. It's polluted.
I'm not saying anything because I feel like we've had this conversation about a million times. I want to have a different one, meaning I like your sewer analogy, but I think it's a little bit more than a sewer. I think it's now turned into a utility and you need it to run your life. Like you can't do banking, you can't do any kind of activities without the digital world. So to say that they got off the internet, they might have got off a social network, but that's not the internet. And to me, what I'm concerned about is the doors that open and close and the gateways that allow people to go to different places. The IP addresses, the devices themselves, and how they're communicated to. And I don't think they're safe. I know that there was an update on my phone just 2 days ago. I'm sure it was security patches. I'm sure there was something that happened at the operating system level of the iPhone, but they're not going to tell me what, there's not enough white hat hackers that are going to tell me what security updates are being patched.
Yeah, it was.
So I don't know like, in other words, if someone comes in and drills a hole into your house and sticks a camera in your house and doesn't tell you that the camera's there, and someone just says, "Oh, I'll remove the camera," but it was there. I just think we need the transparency is the bottom line. We're not getting transparency. And that goes for the same thing with this government, with the law in 1996. Not a lot of people know about these laws, let alone the latest law that's being passed for security for large language models or for, artificial intelligence. A lot of people don't know what artificial intelligence is at this moment in time, because these algorithms aren't new. They've been going through your data for 20 years now.
There were 2 zero-day patches that were discovered recently, and Apple issued a pair of patches yesterday to patch them, and they said they're security patches. They were zero-day vulnerabilities, but they didn't identify exactly what the vulnerabilities were. They didn't publicize the details. Only said 2 zero-day patches were discovered and patched.
I had something happen the other day and I can't figure out how it happened. So Joshua, maybe you could help me on this. I was at Kohl's and I wanted to get the coupon. So I used my license because I didn't have the Kohl's credit card. And then it got charged to the Kohl's credit card. But I wanted to pay that credit card off because it's not a card I use. So I took my other credit card and I put it in to pay off that account. And it wasn't working. Said it was declined. Okay, I pulled it out. When I got to the car, I got a text saying that my card's been disabled. So I thought, oh, they must see me. I'm in another state. They disabled it. But it turned out it wasn't really from my bank at all. Luckily, I wasn't able to click because I didn't have enough cell service, because I realized when I got back, it was a scam. The bank was spelled wrong. It was just a total scam. But my point is, who was the culprit in this situation? All I did is put my card in the Kohl's reader. They knew my phone number because they texted me with the link. So I'm just trying to figure out, was it the cashier? Like, how did I get targeted? I'm just curious, since it's coming up, I might as well ask you.
I have ideas, but I would be guessing. It'd be a hypothesis, and I'd have to do the null hypothesis.
Yeah,
So-
I just want the hypothesis.
Well, the Federal Communications Commission is supposed to regulate the phone companies, and the phone companies are the ones that give you the phone number itself. So what is your relationship with your carrier is what it comes down to.
Let me be clear about something. There was no reason for my card to be declined in the first place. I had used it 10 minutes earlier, and when I called my real bank, they said it's fine. So what I'm saying is, when I put that card in, it got declined and I got this text. I'm just trying to figure out why it got,
For all you know, somebody hacked the Kohl's system and is eavesdropping the Kohl's system and is using eavesdropped information to send out bogus alerts. That's one possibility. How do you
And
prove
there's
it? I don't know. You can't. It's just it's one of a number of hypotheses that you can float.
Yeah, is that known as skimming? Like they skim your credit card and they could get info. Yeah.
Yeah, if they eavesdrop, they can get the credit card number or some information, and then say, "Oh, this customer is using this service, and they're using it legitimately, but I overheard them use it, Now I'm going to send that person, I'm going to identify that person and send them a scam to make them think that it's connected to what they just did.
But I wouldn't necessarily blame the cashier, would I?
No, very likely it was somebody who hacked into the whole system.
Okay. All right. I was curious okay, thank you.
I mean, it could be the cashier. The cashier could be a mole. How would you know? That's another possibility.
I mean, companies always have to deal with data breaches now. So, yeah, it may come out sometime in the future. But for your own, see, we are now responsible for protecting our identity. So it's just, and it seems the internet's always been that way. The people using it are contractually obligated to their personal responsibility for their actions. And yeah, it's like bypassing the consumer protections that are in place for other things.
There's one thing you
Also-
can do, Stacy, if I may.
go ahead.
When you strip your card or stick your card into some device, just look for any foreign device that get attached to the card reader itself. If there's some foreign object that get attached to the,
Yeah,
the
no.
reader, if you look at it very carefully, there'll be another one that something else that get attached to it. Those are devices that pick up and hacking into the system. So usually that's what you look for. Is like, okay, whatever the device is that only one piece, nothing extra attached to it.
Okay.
That's what you can
Thanks.
do for.
Thank
yeah.
you.
I deal with credit card fraud for last 30 years. Believe me, it's everywhere. I have a customer
Very
that
ubiquitous. I mean, I get notices saying, be aware of the scam. The Social Security sends out a notice says, beware of Social Security scams. I keep getting alerts of watch out for these scams. Even Google Mail says, pay attention to this email. It might be a scam.
The other thing I wanted to say regarding section 230 and just the whole idea of how I do understand, it's my criticism of almost everything. To me, I think that if you're a small potato, if you have a small following, maybe there's no need for regulation. Maybe the regulation should only be for after you have a certain number of followers, or now I'm talking about social media specifically, like maybe that's the answer. If your reach is only, if you only have 500 followers, let's say, maybe you shouldn't need to be subjected to the same standards as somebody that has 50,000 followers. I mean, there's like a power dynamic that I believe should be addressed. That's how I feel about government regulation in general. If you're, a small time person, you don't need, I had a pool guy that said he was not allowed, if he got to a pool and there was a dead rodent in the pool, he was not allowed to, I don't remember specifically what he said, but he needed a specific license. And there was a good reason, but the good reason always has to do with the abuse of some larger, more powerful entity. So why not just regulate the larger, more powerful entities and leave the little people alone?
The larger, more powerful entity is the government itself. And a government does not regulate itself.
Right, but at this point, I think things have shifted where I think businesses are more powerful than government. So, the same rhetoric that was used years ago that people are standing by, why would I trust businesses more than government? I wouldn't.
Well, some businesses are ethical, but the minority of them, most of them are greedy. Most of
Josh?
them put profit ahead of.
I was just going to state the obvious. Some governments are businesses.
Right, exactly.
It's a corporation.
If it's good for GM, it's good for the government. Well, who said that line? The business of government is business. Yeah.
But to Barry's point is, how do we get a law that is no longer serving the public off of the books? How
And
do we
we have-
reverse laws? And
we
what
have-
is the process to do that? And how does a populace help? You know, if you call your senator and they're not listening to you, what do you do?
The two guys who wrote Section 230 now realize it was a mistake, and they've been trying to get it off the books, and they can't.
Yeah.
Creators of it want it off the books or modified, and they can't convince the rest of Congress to change it. They've tried.
I'd just like to throw out the idea, does Congress really represent us or not? No, we know that. Now, a congressperson may have like 1 million people in some states. How can one person represent 1 million people? And the original founding had a First Amendment where they originally thought, okay, let's limit it to 1 representative per 30,000. And then there was discussion, okay, let's make it 40,000. And really it's supposed to be limited to 50,000, but that First Amendment never got ratified. So what if we had that? What if you had like 6,500 representatives where you had that? This is a theory, but what if you had more local representation and you had the technology to have those 6,500 vote based on the conscience of the people? And what if they didn't work from Washington, D.C.? What if they had to live with the people they represented and work, and they didn't get paid so much? So there's original thinking about possibilities for change, and maybe in other countries they have different models. But yeah, I mean, short of a constitutional convention, what are the, yeah, where's the out of the box thinking on this? Just throwing that out there.
And I think what still has to be addressed in conjunction with that is that even if you were following what people wanted, do people know what the answer is? I mean, I don't understand the subject enough to tell you what the solution is. And I'm sure that people that do understand disagree on what the solution is. So even if they were representing what I wanted, I don't know what I want. I don't know what the answer is. And this goes back to, I think, the beginning of our call, which had to do with model-based reasoning. First, we need to really understand all the pieces before we can decide, okay, so what's the best way to work it out? And, you know, maybe run some scenarios. What could be the result this way? But what about if this happens? And what about if that happens? And okay, how can we mitigate that? And how, you know, because it's not a fixed thing. We're human beings. Different situations happen. What might be right in one circumstance is not going to be the right thing in the next, which brings back to what Barry's always saying about rules versus protocols. So representation is part of it, but it still comes down to the way who's ever making decisions makes decisions, and what force is inserted where for what reasons, in my opinion.
Politicians make policy. Politicians make policy, and politicians do not employ model-based reasoning.
Yet.
And probably not in my lifetime. Of course, I haven't got that many years left. Probably not in any of our lifetime.
Well, there is a large language model that's starting to look at lot of data at once and help people understand it. So whoever's controlling that large language model controls the population, because it's just a matter of time before the large language model makes policy.
Well, the large language model needs to have the faculty of model-based reasoning with good models undergirding it, which the present LLMs don't have.
Correct. So we're at a very critical point right at this moment, is if there's enough language models And if they can fight each other, meaning they can duke it out in the town square and let us watch the debate, that's going to be, I can just see it already. I mean, maybe it's 3 years off, maybe it's 10 years off. Dun, 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 dun. Now, tonight's debate, the large
That'd be
language model
great.
of Google will be debating the language model of Facebook on the subject of trans rights. I mean,
That would be great, Joshua.
I
Really
don't know if
great.
it's great, but I don't know if it's great because,
It's
like Jerry
great if
said,
we can then have input. We have the technology that we can
But-
watch the debate, and then as individuals, we can plug in where we want to plug in.
I'll
Like
make,
that's something that I've been visualizing in my head for years. Like, yeah, I think it would
Like
be
I'll
great.
make a
the
prediction,
Nelson.
Stacy. I'll make a prediction that if we have that, here's what I predict will happen. And you can see if my prediction comes true. You will get polarization and schismogenesis. You'll divide, you'll get polarities. And one side will argue for that side, and the other one will argue for that side, and you won't get any consensus. You'll get polarization, schismogenesis, antagonism, and war.
It's really funny that you say that, and I agree with you. I agree with you. This whole piece that Joshua said is something that I used to envision as being what I would use as a diversion to keep the kids playing. Like years ago when we used to talk about, like, well, I used to talk about like the Facebook population and how this is the activity that I wanted to gear them towards. I wanted to keep them in front of the screens, learning in a situation the way Josh just described, playing. This would be almost like a video game that they'd be playing, and they could be as polarized as they wanted, because while that part of the population was doing that, the more mature people would be doing policy. So this is actually, yeah, anyway.
I think to Eric's point is democracy is not being played out in front of us, and it's being pretended to be played out. Like, in other words, you have the power to vote for A or B. That is not democracy. You have the power to go to the store and come back to your house, and no one's going to harass you. But when you're at your house or when you're at the store, you're being monitored at both places. That's not freedom. So the guys, it's, I mean, it's being brought up right now in real time in the news of an open air prison of Palestine. And I don't hear people say, are we living in an open air prison in America? And that's the next conversation that's about to arise in American politics is, are we actually free?
No.
Or do we? And that's the question that I think needs to go back to the 1970s of people who wrote a very clear vision of the future. They put it in public, they published it, and then they enacted it. And we are now living under those laws of those, they were called neocons at the time, but it's the future that they predicted that they'll be able to control the populace in a certain way. And now here we are and we're controlled. How do we get out from under that control? Short of a civil war.
Again, just to bring it back to individuals, because this is really what bothers me the most. Most people, the minute somebody says something they don't like, they turn on them. And this, like when Barry talks about politicians, and I know, Barry, you've mentioned that, Bernie Sanders is a systems thinker. And, he's somebody I greatly admire. And I look to him on different topics because I want to hear what he has to say, because I trust him as a thinker, just in general. But with most politicians, they're just saying exactly what they know their people want to hear. It doesn't matter to them if it's true or not. He's one of the few people that takes a risk and says what's not popular to different groups of people. And you can't succeed in that system that way. As people, we do the same thing. Many of us, as soon as somebody says something they're no longer our friend anymore. Or, we're not watching their TV show anymore. We don't like them anymore. We're not listening to their music anymore. Let's boycott this company. That's crazy. It's really crazy. Josh?
Did you see the latest interview with the New York Times and Elon Musk this week?
I have been on a media blackout. I haven't seen
Okay.
anything in a month.
That subject was brought up in that interview, and what they were saying to Elon Musk is, you said something that the populace doesn't agree with about Jews and what's going on in Israel. And he actually didn't say anything. He agreed to something someone else said. And he said right afterwards, he made a statement blatantly, I am not anti-Semitic in any way whatsoever. But the judgment of the populace had already labeled him an anti-Semite. So it was already a done deal. So thus, the large corporations were not going to advertise on his platform. So instead of being blackmailed and saying, okay, we've already agreed that you need to change your ways because you say something we don't agree with, you're going to have to walk that back and apologize. And instead of walking it back, he said, well, then you can just drive the company out of business and go F yourself. And that was not popular to say that, but he didn't want to be blackmailed by those companies. If they're going to not advertise and make the company go out of business, well, then let it be. And I found that to be a very strong stance for someone who's supposed to be a public figure.
Well, I'm really relishing in all that because over the past 5 years, I've kind of removed myself from people that think that way and from people that, cut people off. So I'm already surrounded by people that don't think that way. And now I'm seeing an alliance between people that do cut people off. And now they're in one big pot and they don't know if they're coming or going because they're heroes or now they're villains. They're villains. They kind of like what they're saying now. And it's like, on one hand, they were like, celebrities should shut up. Now they're saying, where are the celebrities? Why aren't they speaking? And I'm just like, I'm just staying out of it. It's not worth my energy, but it's what is it called? Schadenfreude? where you're it's my guilty pleasure watching them get a taste of their own kind of dysfunction.
What's the famous saying is if you stop someone that disagrees with you and you cut them out, then it's just a matter of time before they stop you. It's that famous saying from the Nazis in World War II. First they came for these people, no one said anything.
Well, yeah, and that's really what's upsetting me. Yeah, yes, exactly.
In other words, we need to stand up for the people we disagree with, not because we agree with them, because they have the right to disagree with us. And by allowing discourse and disagreement, we allow freedom of communication, of unity. It's the freedom of unity. That's really what I have come to realize is if we're not allowed to unite, and who doesn't want the populace to unite? The elites, the lords, the hierarchy, the people who will not benefit from a large group of people uniting together because it will go against them.
That, there are a lot of people that aren't powerful and they may not realize it though, but they're also only able to see things when it affects them. And yeah, I mean, I try to stay away from people like that. I don't have the patience for it anymore. With the whole, I know a lot of Jewish people are really concerned about anti-Semitism, which I am as well. And there are a lot of people that are concerned about Islamophobia, as I am as well. And my point to that group is people that are concerned about hatred should be united. Not only if you hate one group is there a concern. They should understand that people that care about any group being targeted are the ones you want as allies. No matter if the group is migrants, it's the ones that cared about the migrants that you can probably trust to care about you. not the other way around. So if there's a disagreement, talk a little further. Because if they were there to protect this group and this group and this group, you can probably trust them to protect you. And maybe there's just a miscommunication. And if you keep that miscommunication going, yeah, it's going to polarize and it's going to turn into hate. But how about targeting crooks? So Barry says, how about targeting crooks, liars, and villains? Yes, I'm all for that. And I don't care where they're coming from. And that's my point. It's like I said to my friend when we were talking about Trump, I said, look to the people that throw their friends under the bus. You don't want to be around people that throw their friends under the bus. That should tell you something about a person's character. I don't know what Kohlberg's definition of crook is, Eric. What is that?
I'm talking about Kohlberg's moral reasoning. Like if somebody is stealing medicine because their child is dying, would that be a crook? There's shades of gray.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Well, that's the thing,
Les
black and white
Miserables
thinking.
story.
What?
Yep.
Just the Les Miserables story, stealing bread to feed your kid, right?
Yeah, I just watched a news broadcast on all the people that are breaking into cars in San Francisco. It's one every 15 seconds. And they were interviewing the actual people that are doing it. And you don't get to see those people's voices very often, but they were like, you know what? I got to do what I got to do because this is the way it is now. It wasn't they don't look at themselves as crooks. They look at themselves as entrepreneurs or opportunists because the opportunity has arisen where they can make money doing illegal activities because that's the way society has turned.
They
So it's just part of
normalize,
society.
they take what used to be considered an illegal activity, they normalize it. Politicians will normalize illegal activity so they can make money at it, and it's no longer illegal. They just simply
Right.
change the law.
Which
I'm
is
sorry. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I have to go. I just want to say goodbye.
Okay.
Okay. Take care.
Bye, Stacy.
Bye-bye.
It's 6 minutes past 10, so
Can I just read a small package from last week? Because I think last week we had spent a little bit of time talking about Bohmian dialogue, and we had considered whether or not we wanted to adopt that. So let me just read for the record what Bard last week said. I know you had a different version, but Bard said it included, these are the core principles of Bohmian dialogue. Suspending judgment. Participants strive to set aside their personal opinions and beliefs to listen attentively to others' perspectives. Active listening. Participants listen not only to the words spoken, but also to the underlying thoughts, feelings, and intentions behind them. Exploring assumptions. Participants identify and examine their own assumptions and biases that may be influencing their understanding. Identifying shared meaning. Participants engage in a collaborative process to uncover the underlying patterns and commonalities in their viewpoints. Embracing silence. Silence is viewed as a space for reflection and contemplation, allowing thoughts and feelings to emerge without interruption. I just thought I'd put that in the record because we had discussed possibly adopting them. Over.
Oh, I didn't realize we had it on the table for us to adopt.
My question about that is, can that be done during the meeting, or is that more like analyzing it afterwards and saying, okay, at 30 minutes, this is what I was feeling, this is what the dynamics were. Yeah, where's the value?
Both.
Mhm.
The more we're aware of what's going on, the more we actually apply that in real time.
You notice, you have to keep in mind that David Bohm tried it for, I don't know, a decade or two, and he basically threw up his hands and fled to South America because he just couldn't get it to work, except with one correspondent, Krishnamurti.
That was a different time.
Well, yeah, it was what, 40 years ago? I don't know exactly when that was, but yeah,
Longer.
more 50 years ago, 60.
I would suggest that the simplest thing you can do is that when we start the meeting, we just copy and paste it into the chat so that it reminds us. We might read it if you want to, but use it as a structure to hopefully guide us. I feel in most of the conversation we have today, we meet all the criteria. Of course, there can be some smaller fine tuning that we can do better. No question about it. We talk about a lot of human, complex, multi-layers, very deep, as well as very shadow, as well as very meta, what I call it meta, because it's at a big picture perspective, a lot of special cases that, you know, we don't consider, right? So for example, rule is, you have to apply rule for the masses. You cannot apply protocol to the masses because protocol is specific for one individual. So when you put it at a different level, as much as we like it, it doesn't work very well. So that's my input on that.
I think if you had a call where we agree we're going to look at this previous call and we're going to visually use a tool to map it out and see, so everybody sees at once, we try to get the accurate representation of what people think was going on. But that's a lot of work and people have to want to do that work. Yeah.
My suggestion is that if you really want to follow this, the way I would do it would be print out this short list and put it right next to your computer screen and then hang it on the wall, whatever it is. Just look at it every 5 seconds whenever you get a chance. That'll help you to guide you. There's a guide rail that we can, visual guide rail. With that, I'm complete. 10 minutes past 10. Thank you very much. Wonderful conversation. Today we have the most meaningful, what should I say, dense conversation. Thank you. We'll talk tomorrow.
Yeah, I won't be able to make it tomorrow, but thank you.
Good to see you, Eric. Thank you, everyone.